Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're going to be taking a look at how language shapes our world,
Okay.
especially in politics and business.
Right.
And you gave me Words That Work by Frank Luntz to kind of unpack.
Yeah.
And I gotta admit, I'm intrigued by this.
It's a classic for a reason.
Yeah.
Luntz is like a language whisperer.
Mm.
He helps politicians and companies really tap into the psychology of persuasion.
Oh, wow.
And he shows how choosing the right words can dramatically affect how people perceive a message and how they respond to it.
That's so interesting because now I'm thinking about all those political slogans,
Uh-huh.
you know, those ones that stick in your head for better or worse.
Exactly. And Luntz would argue it's not just about what you say, but what people hear.
Right.
Their own experience, their biases, even the sounds of the words themselves, all of that colors how they interpret it.
So even if you're saying something that is technically true,
Uh-huh.
the way you frame it can completely change the impact.
Absolutely. A perfect example is estate tax versus death tax. Same policy.
Right.
Wildly different reactions.
Death tax just sounds so much more ominous.
Yes.
Like you're being punished for dying.
Exactly.
No wonder politicians use that one.
It taps into deep-seated anxieties.
Wow.
And Luntz uses those insights not just to kind of critique, but to craft language.
Right.
For campaigns like Newt Gingrich's Contract with America.
Oh, okay. Yeah, remind me about that. That was a big deal back in the 90s.
It's huge. It laid out the Republican agenda for the 1994 midterm elections.
Okay.
And Luntz would argue that the language was key to its success.
So beyond just like listing policies, how did they use words to actually sway voters?
Well, they focused on simple, emotionally charged terms.
Okay.
Instead of smaller government, they promised personal responsibility.
Got it.
Instead of these abstract economic theories, they talked about family values.
Yeah.
Things that people could connect with on a gut level.
Right. So it's like they're speaking directly to people's anxieties
Yes.
and aspirations, not just throwing facts at them.
Exactly. And it resonated. The Republicans won control of Congress.
Wow.
A historic shift.
Huge.
But Luntz didn't just work in politics. He helped companies like Pfizer and Anheuser-Busch
Okay.
connect with customers.
Wow.
He even consulted on O.J. Simpson's defense.
Okay, now that's a story I need to hear more about. But first,
Yeah.
let's break down like Luntz's core principles.
Okay.
He has those 10 rules for effective communication, right?
He does. But before we dive into those, I think it's important to understand the context a bit.
Okay.
Luntz was writing in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Right.
The media landscape was very different.
No social media.
Exactly. No social media, no smartphones.
Right.
People got their news from a much smaller pool of sources.
Right.
So while his 10 rules are still relevant, we have to kind of consider
Okay.
how the rise of the internet and 24-hour news cycles and fragmented media have changed the game.
So it's like his insights are a foundation, but we need to adapt them for today's world.
Absolutely.
That makes sense. Okay, hit me with those rules.
All right.
What's the first one?
Simplicity.
Okay.
Luntz argues that small words can have a big impact.
Right.
Think Nike's "just do it."
Oh, yeah.
3 words, instantly recognizable, incredibly motivating.
Yeah, it's true. Those short, punchy phrases really stick with you.
Yes.
Like, got milk.
Uh-huh.
It's silly but effective.
Exactly. Luntz believes plain language cuts through the noise,
Right.
and it makes a lasting impression. Avoid jargon, avoid technical terms that people just won't understand.
It's like when you read a scientific article with all these complex terms.
Yeah.
You might get the gist, but you don't really grasp it.
Exactly. His second rule is all about clarity.
Okay.
People have to believe what you're saying,
Right.
and that means keeping your promises.
Broken promises kill trust.
Yes.
Like, remember the new Coke fiasco?
Oh, yes.
Talk about a marketing disaster.
Uh-huh.
They promised a better Coke, alienated their loyal customer base,
Yeah.
and it backfired spectacularly.
A perfect example. Consumers felt betrayed, and the brand suffered.
Yeah. So lesson learned, under-promise, over-deliver.
Yes.
Be honest, be genuine, build that trust.
Yes.
And it's funny how these principles apply to everything from global brands to our personal relationships.
They do. Luntz emphasizes consistency.
Okay.
Find a strong message and stick with it. Repetition is key, even if it seems redundant.
Because most people aren't analyzing every word like we are.
Exactly.
They'll need multiple exposures for it to sink in.
Precisely. Don't assume your audience is hanging on your every word. They're
Right.
bombarded with messages constantly.
Yeah.
It's also about staying true to your core message and values.
Okay, so that makes sense.
Yes.
You need to be consistent, but you also need something that grabs people's attention.
Yes.
Is that where the novelty factor comes
You
in?
got it. Rule number 5, offer something new. A fresh take on an old idea.
Okay.
Remember the phrase accidental manslaughter?
Yeah.
Coined by O.J. Simpson's lawyer?
It doesn't actually exist as a legal term, right?
Nope.
Yeah.
But it perfectly captured the defense's narrative, and it's stuck in the public's mind.
It's crazy how a single phrase can shape the way we perceive an event,
Uh-huh.
even a trial with mountains of evidence.
That's the power of language.
Yeah.
This applies to marketing, too. People are flooded with information, so you need to stand out.
And so find a unique angle, something that makes people stop and think.
Yes.
What's next on Luntz's list?
Visualize,
Yeah.
show, don't tell. Like
Right.
Reagan's masterful use of visuals to amplify his message.
Oh, yeah.
Think of his speech at the Brandenburg Gate, challenging Gorbachev to tear down the Berlin Wall.
The setting itself added so much weight to his words.
Absolutely. A powerful image evokes feelings and creates lasting memories in a way that words alone can't always achieve. It's
Yeah.
about crafting an experience, not just delivering information.
Okay, so far we've got simplicity,
Yes.
credibility, consistency, novelty.
Yes.
But what about actually inspiring people to act?
Yes.
Is that where aspiration comes in?
You nailed it. Speak aspirationally. Tap into people's hopes and dreams and desires.
Like Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech.
Yes.
It wasn't just about the problems, it was about painting a picture of a better future.
A powerful example. This applies to both politics and business.
Yeah.
People are drawn to brands and leaders who inspire them to strive for something more.
Right, so don't just tell people what they need, show them what they want,
Yes.
and make them believe they can achieve it. It's brilliant.
And it works. Think about the most successful advertising campaigns.
Uh-huh.
They all tap into our aspirations.
That's so true.
But sometimes it's not about giving answers. It's about provoking thought.
Okay.
That's where rule number 8 comes in. Ask a question.
Reagan was a master of this too, right?
It was.
Using those rhetorical questions to draw people in and make them consider his perspective.
Exactly. It makes people feel like they're part of the conversation.
Yeah, it's almost like inviting them to go on this mental journey with you.
Yeah.
Instead of lecturing, you're engaging them in the thought process.
Precisely. That sense of participation makes the message stick.
Okay, so we've covered a lot so far.
We have.
Keep it simple,
Uh-huh.
credible,
Yeah.
consistent, novel, and aspirational.
Yes.
Use visuals, ask questions.
Yes.
What else does Luntz have up his sleeve?
2 more crucial rules.
Good.
Number 9 is context.
Okay.
The same words can have wildly different meanings depending on the situation.
Right, so understanding your audience and tailoring your message is crucial.
Exactly. The meaning of words changes over time.
Right.
Think about how gay or occupy have evolved.
Yeah, it's fascinating how language reflects our evolving culture and understanding.
It is.
And if we don't keep up, we risk miscommunication.
That's right. And that brings us to the final rule. Test your words.
Okay.
Luntz uses focus groups and dial sessions to gauge how people respond to different phrases.
So it's like peeking behind the curtain of political campaigns and marketing. He gets a bunch of people together, shows them different messages, and sees what resonates.
Exactly. He's looking for the words that trigger the right emotions, and sometimes figuring out what not to say is just as important.
Right. I bet that's how you avoid those PR disasters,
Yes.
where a company says something totally tone deaf.
Absolutely.
So we've covered Luntz's 10 rules.
We have.
But it's not just about the words themselves, is it?
No, it's not.
It's about the person delivering them too.
You're absolutely right. There's another crucial aspect to effective communication that we haven't discussed yet. Persona.
Oh, Coke.
Stay tuned, because next we're going to dive into the fascinating world of persona and how it can make or break your message.
I'm already hooked. Now I'm thinking about all the different ways that politicians communicate.
Yeah.
Some have that charisma, others have that calm, trustworthy vibe.
We'll unpack that next time. We'll explore how figures like Arnold Schwarzenegger and Bill Clinton
Okay.
use their unique personalities to connect with voters
Wow.
in completely different ways.
This is getting good. I can't wait to hear more. What stood out to you so far about these techniques?
It's amazing how much of this we encounter every day without even realizing it.
Yeah.
From the slogans on TV to the way politicians phrase their arguments, We're constantly being influenced
That's true.
by the power of words.
Yeah.
But if we learn to recognize these techniques, we become more aware of their consumers and citizens.
Right.
Maybe we can even use them ourselves.
Now that's a thought-provoking idea. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive. Stick around for part 2. There's much more to come.
Yes, there is. So picking up where we left off, it's not just about saying the right words, it's about embodying the message you're trying to convey.
Right. It's like you said earlier, it's about being the message, not just delivering it.
All right, think about someone like Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Okay.
He has that larger-than-life persona, like a natural charisma.
Yeah.
People might disagree with his policies,
Uh-huh.
but they're drawn to his energy and confidence.
He makes you believe, even if just for a moment, that anything is possible.
Precisely. Contrast that with Bill Clinton.
Okay.
He had a different kind of appeal, like a calculated coolness, a mastery of connecting with people on an emotional level.
Yeah. Clinton was known for making people feel like he really understood their struggles.
Exactly. He used language that resonated with everyday experiences, hopes and fears.
Right.
It was deliberate, but it worked.
So 2 very different personalities.
Yeah.
2 very different approaches,
Uh-huh.
but both effective.
Both effective.
It seems like the key takeaway here is authenticity.
Yes,
People can spot a phony a mile away.
absolutely. And this leads us to another important aspect of Luntz's work, the impact of memorable words,
Okay.
both the good and the bad.
Right. The good ones can turn a campaign into a movement.
Yes.
The bad ones, well, those can haunt a politician forever.
Exactly. The good ones can elevate a brand or a campaign,
Right.
making it instantly recognizable.
Yeah.
But the bad ones can define a career for all the wrong reasons.
It's like those words become inseparable from the person who said them.
Yes.
Luntz argues we can learn from both, right?
The successes show us what works,
Right.
the failures what to avoid.
Yeah.
It's a masterclass in communication, but with real-world stakes.
Right.
Now let's dive into some of the case studies from the book.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay.
There's that one that keeps coming up,
Yeah.
the contract with America.
Mm-hmm.
Luntz helped craft the language for that, right?
He did. It outlined the Republican agenda for the 1994 midterms,
Okay.
and it was a resounding success.
Wow.
They won control of both the House and the Senate for the first time in decades.
And Luntz argues the language itself played a significant role in that victory.
He does. Instead of focusing on these abstract concepts like smaller government,
Right.
they use terms like personal responsibility and family values.
Yeah, those terms feel more tangible, more relatable to everyday life.
Exactly. They tapped into emotional touchstones, values that resonate with a wider audience. It gave voters something to believe in a sense of shared values and goals.
Okay, so it's a great example of how language can shape a narrative and mobilize a movement.
Uh-huh.
But these principles aren't just for politicians, are they?
Not at all. Luntz argues that we can apply these techniques to everyday challenges
Okay.
and conversations.
Now that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
How can we use this stuff to navigate those tricky situations we all face?
Well, he dedicates a whole section to what he calls personal language for personal scenarios.
Okay.
He tackles things like gender differences in communication,
Right.
which can be a major source of misunderstanding.
Oh, I know that all too well.
Yeah.
Sometimes it feels like men and women are speaking completely different languages.
He argues that men tend to focus on problem solving,
Okay.
while women are more interested in connecting emotionally.
It's that classic stereotype.
Yes.
Men want to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
Women want to talk about it.
Right. And if you don't recognize these differences, it can lead to frustration and conflict.
So how do we bridge this communication gap? What does Luntz suggest?
For men, he emphasizes the importance of listening and validating their partner's feelings
Oh, right?
instead of jumping in with solutions.
Right.
Try to understand their perspective
Yeah.
and offer emotional support.
Sometimes just feeling heard and understood is more important than any quick fix.
Absolutely. And for women, he suggests being more direct and assertive about what you want and need.
No more hinting or hoping your partner will read your mind.
Exactly. This
Yeah.
applies to all relationships, not just romantic ones.
Right.
Clear, respectful communication is key to building strong connections.
This is great. I feel like I'm already learning so much.
Good.
But what about those more, shall we say, tactical applications of language?
You mean like talking your way out of a speeding ticket?
Exactly.
Luntz has got you covered there, too.
Okay.
He provides a step-by-step guide on how to use language to your advantage when dealing with law enforcement.
Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting. I'm all ears.
First and foremost, he emphasizes respect and politeness.
Okay.
Remember, the officer is just doing their job.
Don't get defensive or argumentative. Got him.
Right. Acknowledge their authority and express understanding of the situation.
Okay.
You might say something like, I understand that I was speeding, officer, and I apologize for breaking the law.
Okay, so start by owning up to the mistake. What's next?
Then focus on language that emphasizes your good character
Right.
and willingness to cooperate.
Okay.
Perhaps mention you've never had a ticket before,
Uh-huh.
or that you're generally a safe and responsible driver.
So appeal to their sense of fairness
Yes,
and show that this was an isolated incident.
exactly. Avoid making excuses.
Right.
Just take responsibility
Okay.
and express your willingness to learn from the experience.
Got it.
Finally, offer a sincere apology and express gratitude for their time.
Something like, thank you for your time, officer. I appreciate your understanding, and I'll be sure to drive more carefully in the future.
Perfect. You've just applied Luntz's techniques to a real-life scenario. Wow.
No, of course, there's no guarantee it'll work every time.
Right, but it's definitely worth a try.
Yes.
It's fascinating how the right words can potentially change the outcome of a situation.
That's the power of language. And
Yeah.
Luntz argues that we can all learn to use it more effectively.
Right.
It's not about manipulation. It's about understanding your audience,
Mm-hmm.
connecting emotionally, and building trust.
It's about using words to create positive outcomes,
Yes,
not just to get what you want.
exactly. We've covered personal relationships
Right.
and even dodging tickets.
Yeah.
What other everyday situations does Luntz cover?
I'm curious about that, too.
Yeah.
Does he give advice on things like asking for a raise
Yes.
or nailing a job interview?
He does. He offers tips on everything from negotiating a salary to writing a compelling cover letter.
Wow.
He even provides guidance on how to talk to your kids about sensitive topics.
Wow. This book really is a communication toolbox.
It is.
But beyond those practical tips, what's the overarching takeaway about effective communication? I think the biggest takeaway is that it's not about trickery, it's about connection. It's about understanding your audience, empathizing with them, and using language to build bridges of understanding.
It's about being authentic, being respectful, and using your words to create a positive impact on the world.
Well said. Now, before we move on to the next part of our deep dive,
Okay.
there's one more area I want to touch on.
All right.
Luntz talks a lot about the evolution of language, doesn't he?
He does, and I think that's especially relevant today with social media and the internet constantly reshaping how we communicate.
Absolutely. He highlights how the meaning of words shifts over time
Right.
and how new words are constantly being created.
It's true.
Language is a living thing, always adapting to reflect our changing culture.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what words or phrases that we use today will seem completely outdated in a few years.
That's a great question.
Right.
Think about words like selfie, hashtag, or meme.
Right.
These words barely existed a decade ago.
Yeah.
And now they're part of our everyday vocabulary.
It's amazing how quickly new words become mainstream,
Mm-hmm.
especially in the digital age.
Yes.
But it's not just about new words, is it?
No.
Existing words are also taking on new meanings.
You're right. Think about the word friend.
Okay.
In the age of social media,
Yeah?
it has expanded to encompass a much broader range of relationships.
Right. You can have hundreds of friends online,
Mm-hmm.
but how many of those are people you genuinely connect with in real life?
Exactly. The meaning of friend has become more fluid,
Right.
encompassing everything from close confidants to casual acquaintances.
That's like language itself is being reshaped by our online interactions.
It is. And it's not just technology driving this evolution.
Yep.
Social and political movements also play a role.
Right.
Think about phrases like Black Lives Matter and Me Too.
Yeah, these phrases became rallying cries for important social movements.
Yes.
They sparked conversations about systemic issues and demanded change.
And they did so through language that is powerful, evocative, and impossible to ignore. Language can be a tool for raising awareness,
Yeah.
challenging injustice, and driving social progress.
It's a reminder that words have the power to shape not just our thoughts,
Mm-hmm.
but also our actions and the course of history itself.
And that's why Luntz stresses the importance of paying attention to these shifts in language.
Right.
We can't get stuck in the past
Yeah.
or assume that everyone defines words the same way.
If we don't keep up, our communication becomes outdated, ineffective, and we risk being left behind.
Precisely. It's all about staying informed, being adaptable, and recognizing how language evolves.
Right.
It's about being mindful of the words we choose and the impact they have on others.
This has been an incredible deep dive into the power of language.
It
I
has.
feel like I'm already starting to see the world differently,
Yes.
noticing how language is being used all around me.
Yeah, that's fantastic to hear, and there's so much more to explore.
Yeah,
Are you ready to dive into the next part of our deep dive?
I'm more than ready. Let's continue our exploration of words that work. So we talked about how language shapes perception in politics and even in our personal lives.
Right.
But Luntz also dives into how, like, specific industries use words to their advantage.
But he has some fascinating examples of what he calls linguistic maneuvering.
Okay.
It's about how companies use language to shape public perception
Right.
and ultimately sell more products or services.
Okay, I'm all ears. What kind of examples does he give?
Well, one that stands out is how the gambling industry
Okay.
rebranded itself as the gaming industry.
Hey, is there actually a difference?
Yeah.
Or is that just semantics?
Technically, it's the same activity,
Right.
but the words carry very different connotations.
Okay.
Gambling sounds risky.
Yeah.
Maybe even a little bit seedy.
Right.
Gaming sounds more fun, more high-tech, even family-friendly.
It's like they took something with a negative image and gave it a makeover.
Exactly. And that shift in language helped soften public perception and make it more appealing to a wider audience.
So suddenly it's not about shady casinos.
Right.
It's about exciting video games and entertainment.
Exactly.
That's a brilliant example of how a simple word swap can have a huge impact.
And it's not just gambling.
Right.
Luntz also talks about the alcohol industry.
Right.
They've increasingly started using the term spirits
Okay.
instead of liquor.
Spirits definitely sounds more sophisticated.
Exactly. It evokes images of handcrafted cocktails
Yeah.
and artisanal distilleries rather than, say, cheap beer and frat parties.
It's like they're elevating the product,
Uh-huh.
making it seem more aspirational.
Precisely. Luntz argues that this kind of strategic language use is happening everywhere,
Wow.
from the food we eat to the cars we drive.
Right.
Companies are constantly trying to find the words that will make their products more appealing.
So as consumers, we need to be aware of this,
Yes.
right? Look beyond the marketing jargon
Yes.
and think critically about the messages we're being bombarded with.
Absolutely. Luntz's work gives us the tools to do that.
Right.
He's not saying all marketing is bad,
Right.
but he is encouraging us to be more informed and discerning.
It's like he's giving us a decoder ring
Yeah.
to understand the hidden language of persuasion that surrounds us.
That's a great analogy. And this brings us back to a key point we touched on earlier,
Right.
the importance of context.
Right.
Luntz argues that the meaning of words can change dramatically,
Right.
depending on who's using them and for what purpose.
So a word like freedom can mean very different things to different people.
Exactly. It can be used to justify everything from tax cuts to military interventions.
Wow. Yeah.
The same word can be a rallying cry for both liberals and conservatives, depending on how it's framed.
It makes you realize that words are never neutral.
Right.
They're always loaded with meaning and intent.
They are. And that's why it's so important to be aware of the context
Yeah.
in which words are being used.
Mhm.
Who's speaking? What are their motivations? What emotions are they trying to evoke?
Luntz gives that fascinating example of this with debate over the estate tax versus the death tax.
Yes.
It's the same policy, but the words trigger completely different reactions.
He argues that by calling it the death tax,
Right.
opponents of the policy were able to tap into people's fear of death and their aversion to taxes.
Right?
It became much harder to defend the policy, even if you believed it was fair.
It's a brilliant example of how framing an issue in a certain way can completely change the public's perception.
And that's what makes Luntz's work so relevant even decades later.
Yeah.
He helps us understand not just the power of individual words, but the power of language itself
Right.
to shape our thoughts, our beliefs, and our actions.
This has been an incredibly eye-opening deep dive.
It has.
I feel like I have a whole new understanding of how language works and how it's being used to influence me every day.
I'm so glad to hear that. And remember, this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
Words That Work is packed with even more insights and examples. Right.
That we didn't have time to cover today.
Well, maybe I'll have to do a follow-up episode sometime.
I'd love that.
There's clearly a lot more to explore.
But before we wrap things up,
Okay.
is there any final message you'd like to leave our listeners with?
Yes. Actually, Luntz doesn't just tell us how language is being used.
Right.
He also talks about how it should be used. He believes words can be a force for good, a way to build bridges and create a more just and equitable world.
I completely agree. He emphasizes the importance of using language responsibly, authentically, and with empathy.
So, what are some ways we can put this into practice in our own lives?
Well, for starters, we can be more mindful of the words we use to describe others.
Okay.
Avoid language that is hurtful, demeaning, or disrespectful.
It's about recognizing that words have power
Yes,
and choosing to use that power for good.
exactly. We can also use our voices to speak out against injustice and inequality.
Right.
Challenge those who use language to spread hate and division.
And perhaps most importantly, we can use our words to inspire hope
Right.
and create a vision of a better future.
It's a powerful reminder that language isn't just about communication, it's about connection.
Yes.
It's about building relationships, fostering understanding, and creating a world where everyone feels heard and valued.
Beautifully said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this episode of The Deep Dive.
Thank you so much for joining us on this journey into the fascinating world of words that work.
Yes.
We hope you've learned as much as we have.
Until next time, keep paying attention to the words around you
Right.
and the power they hold.
And remember, choose your words wisely
Yes.
because they have the power to shape the world.
they do.
We'll see you on the next deep dive.